I slept with my husband's son. Then we plotted to end his life. Love didn't bring me here, greed did. And now, I'm telling you everything. I married a man who loved his dead wife more than he ever could love me. I slept in her bed, wore her jewelry, smiled through dinner parties with ghosts clinging to the drapes. And then, when his son came home from college, I did the unthinkable. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, consider following me for more infidelity stories and lots more. Let's dive into the gist. Thank you. My name is Brenda. This is my story. I never meant to fall in love with James, my stepson, not really. Growing up in a small town in Indiana, I knew two things for certain: we were poor, and no one was coming to save us. My father drank away our food money, my mother worked herself into the grave cleaning other people's homes, and by the time I turned 23, I'd already buried two siblings to the kind of poverty that doesn't make the evening news. So when James Whitmore stepped into my life, it felt like salvation. He was older, refined, and impossibly wealthy. The kind of man who wore grief like a well-tailored suit. His wife, Mitchell, had died 2 years before we met. Cancer, they said. A slow, cruel death that hollowed out the man but never dulled his kindness. He still kept her photo on the mantle, her perfume on the dresser. I should have seen that as a warning, but I didn't. James needed company. I needed a way out. We met at a charity gala. I was working the coat check, wearing a second-hand dress that barely fit. He asked my name, complimented my smile. 3 months later, he proposed with a diamond the size of my thumb. People whispered about us. How he'd lost his mind, how I was a gold digger. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely right either. I convinced myself I could grow to love him. And maybe I did, in some small, aching way. He treated me kindly, never raised his voice, bought me things I could never dream of owning. But our house, our life, always felt like a borrowed fairy tale, something I was wearing that didn't quite belong to me. Then Andrew came home. He was James's eldest son, finishing his degree in architecture at some college out east. I'd seen pictures of him, sure, but they didn't prepare me for the real thing. Tall, handsome in a reckless sort of way, and younger than me by 3 years. He had Mitchell's eyes, soft and calculating at once. The first time we spoke, it was at breakfast, over orange juice and awkward silence. I caught him staring. And I should have looked away. I should have reminded him, and myself, that I was his father's wife. But there was something about the way he looked at me. Not like I was borrowed or out of place. Not like I didn't belong. For once, I felt seen. It started slow. Accidental touches. Lingering glances. Conversations that strayed too long into the night. James was always busy, always tired. He trusted me. Trusted us. And we betrayed him. The first time it happened, it was like drowning and breathing at once. Andrew kissed me in the library, his father's library, with Mitchell's books still on the shelves. I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. What followed was a storm I never saw coming. Andrew became obsessive. Possessive. He told me he loved me, that James was too old, too blind to see what we had. He wanted me to run away with him. Start a new life. But I couldn't shake the image of James, sitting alone in his study, sipping his tea and waiting for a wife who no longer loved him. I told Andrew it was a mistake. That we needed to stop. He said he understood. He lied. Because the next thing I knew, we were talking about ways to be together, really together. Permanently. And the only thing standing in our way was James. I still don't know if I meant it when I said yes. We talked about options. Car accidents, poison, anything that didn't look suspicious. In the end, Andrew said he could get something clean, untraceable. Just one shot. Painless. He said James wouldn't feel a thing. But I did. Every time I looked at James, guilt clawed up my throat like bile. He'd taken me in, given me a life I could only dream of, and I was planning his murder with his son. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. But I didn't stop it either. Because deep down, a part of me wanted it all. The love, the money, the freedom. I wanted to stop being the poor girl from Indiana who had to scrape for scraps. I wanted to matter. And in Andrew's arms, for a brief, breathless moment, I did. But even fairy tales have consequences. And ours was just beginning to fall apart. It's strange how quickly guilt becomes habit. After that first kiss in the library, everything changed. The mansion felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. Every creak of the staircase, every soft shuffle of James's slippers down the hall made my heart thud in panic. But it didn't stop me. Andrew had that effect, dangerous and magnetic. He had a fire in him I never saw in James. With Andrew, it was heat, wild and selfish. With James, it was warmth, calm and steady. I should have chosen the safer flame. But I was starving for something I couldn't name. I told myself it would just be once. Then once more. And again. And again. We met wherever we could. The pool house. His old bedroom. Even in the garden, late at night under Mitchell's favorite rose arbor. I hated myself for that one. But not enough to stop. He whispered promises in the dark. Called me his queen. Said we were fated. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. Because the alternative. That I was just another mistake, a poor girl who couldn't keep her hands off her husband's son, was too ugly to face. James, sweet soul that he was, never suspected a thing. He thought Andrew and I were finally getting along. Said he was happy we'd found common ground. I smiled and nodded, pretending I didn't have his son's teeth marks on my skin. There were moments, brief, haunting moments, when I'd see James sitting in Mitchell's old armchair, sipping brandy, staring at her photo, and I'd feel something tear inside me. A quiet, invisible rip. He still loved her. She was dead 2 years, and he still loved her more than he ever looked at me. That, too, burned. One night, Andrew stayed in my room longer than he should have. The risk made him bolder. He lit one of James's cigars, the expensive kind, and blew smoke rings toward the ceiling like he owned the place. You don't love him, he said, twirling a strand of my hair around his finger. I married him, I replied. For his money. I didn't respond. Do you love me? He asked. That caught me off guard. I hesitated. I don't know. But you want me. I couldn't deny that. He leaned closer, eyes sharp, voice low. Then let's stop pretending. We want the same thing. Each other. And everything that comes with it. I pulled away. And James? He's old. He's had his life. He doesn't love you, not really. Don't say that. You think he would have married you if Mom was still alive? I didn't have an answer. And he knew it. That was the first time he brought up the plan, not in detail, just hints. What if James was gone? What if we could have the estate, the freedom, no more secrets? I laughed it off. But the seed had been planted. The more I tried to push Andrew away, the deeper I sank. He'd wait for me outside my Pilates classes. Send me flowers under a fake name. I told him to stop. He didn't. Because he knew something I hadn't fully accepted yet. I was no longer just unhappy. I was complicit. One night, after a dinner where James toasted to our blessed family, Andrew followed me to the guest house and closed the door behind him. I talked to someone, he said. A guy I know from school. He can get us what we need. I stared at him. What are you talking about? Something clean. Medical grade. Quick. We do it right, it'll look like a stroke. No pain, no suspicion. I felt the air leave the room. You're serious. I love you, Brenda. Don't you love me too? That question again. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, my hands trembling. It's now or never, he said. He's signing over new trust papers soon. If he adds you officially, it'll make things complicated. But if he dies before... Stop, I said, nearly shouting. Just stop. But I didn't tell him no. And that was all the permission he needed. I could hear the rain ticking against the windows like a metronome that night. Everything in the house felt too still, too quiet. Like it was holding its breath. That was the night we were supposed to do it. We'd picked the date 2 weeks earlier. James had been complaining of fatigue, headaches. Andrew saw it as the perfect opportunity. It'll make it look natural, he said. No questions asked. He'd gotten the substance from someone in his old dorm, a chemistry major with loose morals and tighter debt. It came in a small, amber vial, tucked inside a velvet pouch like something sacred. Andrew held it up in the moonlight once, and I swear it shimmered like a liquid ghost. I asked him how it worked. He said 1 dose, injected into the neck while James was asleep. Heart would slow, then stop. Nothing dramatic. No screams. Just silence. I should have screamed. But by then, I wasn't Brenda from Indiana anymore. I was Brenda Whitmore. The woman who wore diamonds and silk, the woman who stood in the doorway of a mansion built by a dead wife's memory, the woman who slept with her stepson and helped plot her husband's murder. Who was I kidding? I had no idea who I was anymore. James had been especially gentle that day. He brought me breakfast in bed, scrambled eggs, just the way I liked. Kissed my forehead and said he was proud of how I'd handled being a stepmother, even though Collins rarely visited and Andrew was always around. I think Mitchell would have liked you, he said, pouring my tea. That nearly broke me. But I smiled, took the cup with shaking hands, and let him walk away. By the time the house went quiet that evening, I was already dressed in my robe, pacing the floor like a ghost. Andrew met me in the hallway, dressed in all black. He looked excited. Alive. You ready? He whispered. No. I wasn't ready. I wasn't anything. We crept down the corridor like thieves. James's bedroom door was slightly ajar. The lamp on his nightstand was still glowing softly. He was already asleep, breathing slow and even. Andrew looked back at me one last time, as if waiting for a final nod. I didn't give it. But I didn't stop him either. He pulled out the vial and the syringe, hands steady like he'd done it before. He knelt beside the bed, gently brushing James's collar aside to find the right spot. I couldn't watch. I turned away, covering my mouth with both hands. Then, a noise. A soft gasp. I turned just in time to see James's eyes flutter open. Andrew. It happened so fast. The needle dropped. James sat up, confused, eyes wide with betrayal. Andrew froze. And then, the door burst open. 2 uniformed officers stormed in, guns raised. Another man followed, Detective Henley, I would later learn. I screamed. Andrew ran, but didn't make it far. They tackled him just outside the bedroom. Hands up. You're under arrest. James was shaking, still half in shock. One of the officers rushed to his side, checking his pulse. Andrew was on the floor, cursing, yelling that it was all my idea. That I made him do it. And I stood there in my robe, face pale, heart numb, staring at the mess we'd made. I don't know how James found out. Maybe he overheard something. Maybe Collins suspected and hired someone to watch us. Maybe the guilt bled through our smiles, and someone finally noticed. But he knew. He knew enough to call the police. Knew enough to let it play out until the very last second. Knew enough not to trust me. They handcuffed Andrew. I watched as they dragged him down the hall, yelling my name like I was his lifeline. Then they turned to me. Brenda Whitmore, the detective said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." I didn't resist. I didn't cry. I just stood there as they read me my rights. James didn't look at me once. The courtroom was colder than the jail cell. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Or maybe it was the stairs, so many eyes, all trained on me like I was a circus animal. The tabloids called me the widow in waiting. Some said I seduced a family to death. Others painted me as a naive girl who got in over her head. But no one ever asked what I really was, empty. I sat on the defense bench in that stiff gray suit my lawyer picked out for me, watching Andrew from across the room. He wouldn't look at me. After everything we did, everything we said, he wouldn't even lift his eyes. He betrayed me first. From the moment the cops grabbed him, he turned. Claimed it was all my idea. That I'd manipulated him, used sex to twist his mind. That I was the Black Widow, and he was just a boy in love. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me understood. When your whole world collapses, you grab whatever piece you can to keep from being crushed. James sat in the front row, silent, dignified. He wore the same dark suit he'd worn to Mitchell's funeral. His eyes, once warm, were now glass. Not rage. Not sadness. Just absence. I had done that to him. The trial was swift. Too much evidence. Surveillance footage. Texts. Emails. Andrew's confession. My voice, recorded during a whispered conversation I never knew he taped. If we do it right, it'll look natural. Those were my words. My sentence, 22 years without parole. Andrew got 18. He struck a deal, claimed remorse. Said he was manipulated. That word again, manipulated. Funny, how easy it was for people to believe that. That I had all the power. That the girl from Indiana who married for money could hold a man like Andrew Whitmore in her palm. The judge didn't even look at me when he delivered the sentence. He looked at James. Because in the end, this wasn't about law. It was about betrayal. And nothing bleeds worse than betrayal in a rich man's house. Prison stripped me down to nothing. No silk, no makeup, no perfume. Just steel bars and orange jumpsuits. My cellmate, Tanya, was in for armed robbery. She told me on the first day, "Don't cry here. It smells weakness." I didn't cry. Not at first. But when the nights grew long and the noise died down, I'd lie in that narrow bunk, stare at the cracks in the ceiling, and let it hit me, what I'd lost, what I'd broken. I killed my own life. Not James's. Mine. I thought I was climbing up in the world, but I was just burying myself alive. The letters started arriving a few months in. From Collins, mostly. Cold, formal. Updates on the estate. The house had been sold. James moved to Arizona. Alone. I was never mentioned. My name erased from the will. From the walls. From the memory. Once, a letter came from Andrew. It was short. I miss you, sometimes. Not what we did. Just the way you looked at me when I thought I mattered. I never replied. What would I say? That I missed him too? That I hated him? That I hated myself more? There are no words for ruin. Years pass differently in prison. Some fly. Some crawl. I've learned to read again. Not just books, as people. I know who hides blades in their pillow, who cries into their soup. I teach English now, to women trying to earn their GEDs. I write in the margins of old textbooks, trying to leave something behind that isn't poison. Every now and then, a new inmate asks me, "What are you in for?" I always pause. Then say, "Loving the wrong man." It's not the whole truth. But it's not a lie either. Sometimes, I still dream of James. Not the house, not the money, just James. Pouring my tea. Kissing my forehead. Telling me Mitchell would have liked me. And sometimes I think, maybe she wouldn't have. She was the kind of woman who saw through people. I'm 45 now. Gray streaks my hair. I've been sober of lies for years. There's no one waiting for me outside these walls, and I don't expect redemption. But I keep living. Breathing. Writing. Because in the end, This story isn't about a girl who got away with it. It's about a woman who didn't. Not with a kiss. Not with love. But with cold metal bars, courtroom silence, and the echo of everything I lost. I thought I was writing a love story. But in the end, it was a warning. Thank you for listening. Have you heard or experienced a similar story? Let's know how you handle it in the comment section and don't forget to on your notification button for more infidelity stories like this. Thank you.